that happened?
All right, I'll tell you something. David Rockefeller had me trained as a spy. So I was a sex slave, of course, and I was an elite sex slave now, and I was trained as a spy through the mind control training. And so that week, I was sleeping with men, and then I would go report on their weaknesses or their sexual preferences to David Rockefeller.
Why did he need that information? Is that how to blackmail and use it later on in negotiation?
For example. Or if he knows what they want, then he can give it to them sexually. So about Trudeau, I said that I could never please him as long as I was alive. That's how scary that was.
You could never please him?
If I was alive.
With Trudeau?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
It means that he couldn't kill me because at that point I was not a throwaway child, and he scared me enough so that I then tell Rockefeller that that's what he wants a child to kill. Then you understand that the next time he can, if he wants to use that, he can use it. He can use that information.
Rockefeller.
Mm-hmm.
So how many of these celebrities did abuse you during that specific event that you were at for you to come back and report to David?
Oh, God, I don't even remember. I was very busy. And at that time, and, I want to specify that when I was in Belgium, I always had a distance from the perpetrators, and I always knew that they were wrong and that I, was a human being, and that they, even though they treated me like nothing, that I actually, wasn't worth being treated that way. I knew that. When I was mind control trained, which is based on science, it's horrendous science from, probably related to some of the experiments that were done in the camps. And I know it's extremely, when I went into the mind control training, there was no guessing, there was no experimentation. It was just done very precisely to get the result that they wanted, so that I'm a high functioning machine for their purposes. And I did not at that time have the distance to understand that I didn't want that anymore. I thought now, at age 9, I believed that I was this persona and that I was doing this. I would have called it abuse. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, you become immune to it. It's like a mobster that kills somebody so many times. If you watch an interview with Richard Kuklinski, I think Richard, what's his last name, Rob? I think I'm saying it right. Iceman. And you see him in interviews when he's killing people. It's no longer a...
well, that's the network, in the network this happens. And,
Right,
when you go to any gang, you have these little kids that get pulled in, and it's either kill or die.
Sure.
And then, so they get pulled in that way, and it's the same in the network, with violence and pedophilia.
Mm-hmm. But let me stay on this with you here. So you then gave me a name. You said a woman. You didn't give me a name. You said a woman who would be seen as very innocent, because most of the time when we're thinking about this, you're thinking about man. Was this woman also at the same event?
Yes.
She would have to be in her 80s and 90s today.
Mm-hmm.
Politically related or business?
No, celebrity. Celebrity that I told you no one would believe. No one would believe it.
What? And this was in 73. That's 51 years ago. 51 years ago.
Yeah.
That nobody would believe.
Nobody would believe today, no.
And what
Such an icon. this is it. We all have icons, right? We all have people that we look up to. And every icon that I had personally, people I never saw in the network, because I was only there for 5 years, you have to understand. That's a short time. I worked with people that were in much longer, that were born into it, that were in much longer. Every icon that I've had, almost every icon, I have had to let go of. Because I found out from somebody that I'm working with, completely private healing work that we do together. I really wish that we could talk more about the healing because I feel like, oh, yeah, I feel like we're talking a lot about names, and I really, the healing is so important. That is, I think, the reason that I can speak is because I've healed so much, and I understand things that most people don't understand, and I like to speak about those things, like how that really works and everything in the mind, because I was being trained to become like them, and then I chose not to.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, I want to speak about that as well, and also your book as we're going through this, just trying to sit here and, you and I were talking, right, where it's like most people don't want to talk about it. Everybody you've mentioned so far, I had a guy I did an interview with, and he started telling me all these weird stories, and I wanna believe all the stories he's telling me because some of it is actual word when we use unbelievable, and the stories would get more and more and more exaggerated, but there was one pattern. Everybody he ever said anything about, they were all dead, so they couldn't defend the story, right? They couldn't.
I don't just go and tell stories, first of all. I mean, it's taken me most of my adult life to even be ready to speak. The Dutroux case happened in 1996. I was encouraged to speak up then, in 1998, when survivors of the same network in Belgium started to speak out. The Dutroux case took 8 years to go to trial. And then they were left with Marc Dutroux, his wife, and 2 others. Michel Nihoul was one of the defendants. Michel Nihoul I saw in the network. He was there then too. I was not going to speak out. I was not ready. I was afraid. I was afraid to speak out, and also I knew that I wasn't ready. It's not something you want to talk about, first of all. I am a really good writer. I really wish that I could have written stories that would be interesting and well written, and it would be appreciated, and I would be appreciated as a writer. I don't want to be talking about this stuff. I've accepted it because it feels that the divine has wanted me here and with this and talking about it, and I am. But it's not, I'm not here for my ego. It is, I get attacked a lot. I have to deal with a lot of stuff. I have to deal with a lot of miscomprehension, but also attacks. My book, supposed to come out in France more than a month ago, it's been blocked. This translation of my book, it's been blocked. The publisher has not been in contact with me at all. I know that he received at least one mail that was to discredit me, and I've probably received a lot more by now. But anyway, things happen all the time to stop me from speaking out. I'm not just telling stories. I've been so careful to wait until I was ready to say anything at all, because I knew that if I'm going to get attacked and I'm going to go under, or if I'm going to get the love from people, I'm not going to be able to handle it. I'm going to, need it. And I can't need power when I'm going to speak about these things. Do you understand?
I don't think there's anything about power here. I believe this happens. I believe this happens all the time, and I believe it was way more back in the days till today, because back in the days, and by the way, today it's still happening today. You see movies like Sound of Freedom. You see movies like Liam Neeson, Taken 2, Taken 3. Why do movies do so well? And Belgium is known for a lot of things. Europe, there's some of these countries are known for a lot of things. But to me, it's more.
It's a worldwide. It's a global.
Right. It's a $150 billion a year industry. I mean,
no. This is a global, elite network with specific people in it, and they're not all friends. So there can be infighting happening as well. But it is, and when I think of politics, it's like manipulated division. There's so much manipulation, and it's all manipulated to keep people fighting each other, so that will not look at the imposed division that is really between the top and the bottom. And when you start looking at the top, when you really, this is happening now.
Who is the top?
Well, isn't Rockefeller the top? Isn't Rothschild the top? Isn't these people, aren't those people the ones at the top?
No.
So I'm taking all the risks speaking about it. I don't want to say anything. I actually don't even like to say the names, because the truth is, it's not out of loyalty. It's rather that what is right to say when. Yes, saying names eventually is important because I was there. It's my story. I should be able to say
What do
who
you
it
think
was.
about
Who it was.
Jane Fonda and Julie Andrews? What do you think about them?
What do I don't, these are, I think of people like that as potentially just like what I was gonna be, you see.
Got it. Potentially what I was going to be.
Yes, I was supposed to be a celebrity in France. So I was gonna be singing, and I was trained as the sexy, the sexual animal. So that's what was being sold. So that's how these powerful men would then fall for me. And then I could maybe marry a president, that's possible. Whatever it was, but it was really Rockefeller who was behind it.
Okay. So when you're spending time with Rockefeller, you said you didn't know it was him until he died in 2017.
Yeah.
How is that possible? If you're going to these events and these parties and they're mentioning his name, don't they say David Rockefeller?
But the name, I never heard the name. I know him as David.
So they wouldn't say, please help me bring up the, great David Rockefeller.
If I saw his face, I probably would have seen it, because the thing is, I would have not done well if I'd remembered him while I was alive, because he got so deep. You understand? I was a child sex slave. I had not known any love, and this was the best I got at that time.
Right.
And because of that, I would have maybe, there's a lot of parts in me that were very attached to him, that loved him very much. It's part of the reason also why I wouldn't want to necessarily say the name. It feels like disloyal somewhere too, believe it or not.
To who, though?
To him, because there's still parts inside of me that are also attached to him, and of course I've learned a lot. The more I heal, you see, you're talking like somebody who doesn't understand healing very well, because the healing comes from, how is it possible? It's very possible that I had vague memories of an American and some positive connection to that, but then there was also the memory of how I had met him, which was horrific, and I grieved for that, and I in the 90s I was crying over that situation, and I haven't necessarily, healed completely, but at the moment what it is that something begins to manifest, and usually through the body, because our trauma is stuck in the body, and then usually there's a period of, sometimes it's just boom. When he died, it was immediate, and I immediately got the memories, and there was no question. It's, you get traumatized. Why? Because it dissociates you, and then you don't know what your other half is doing. So when we're talking about somebody who has an amazing front, when they're in their front persona, they don't know what they do in their shadow. That's in the shadow. So the mind control is to create dissociation, to create parts that will go, alters, that will go and do things, specific things. And that, of course, that stays. When you're an adult, you're dissociated, so you don't remember most of it, or nothing. And it just comes back little by little. It's a very long and arduous process, and it requires tremendous courage to begin to open up to the possibility, because the first thing that comes when I had the first flashback of this, I was like, no, 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 no. First of all, I thought, if that's true, I'm going to kill myself, which was also programmed into me. But I struggled so hard with, like, this is not true. This is not who I am. I have an idea of myself. Okay, it doesn't work very well, you know, this identification as me in this family, and things aren't really adding up. And at the same time, I never want this to be true. It's impossible. And without the Dutroux case, I had no context either. But I was getting the flashbacks one after the other. The therapist I was with didn't want to know it. She wasn't ready. She didn't want to hear it. She dismissed it. Some things I didn't even bring to her because I knew she wasn't going to be open to it. So so first there was the Dutroux case, when I suddenly realized that all my flashbacks suddenly made sense. And then when things start to make sense, then suddenly a bunch of other things start to make sense as well. Like, for example, behaviors of mine, or what I call cover memories. There's certain things that I know, and I've always known them, and I may have put them in a certain context, but suddenly, if this is true, if this what I'm pulling out of the shadows here, if that is true, then that also makes sense. And so it becomes a personal investigation into these memories.
Where do you live right now? In the state, not state.
In New York.
You live in New York. And how long you been in the States?
Since 1985.
And you don't know who David Rockefeller is till the day he died in 2017 in New York? The Rockefeller Center? The Rockefeller this?
I told you I never heard the name Rockefeller.
You can't, that's not possible.
Yes, of course it's possible. I'm a child sex slave. Why would I hear the name Rockefeller? Who says it? Nobody told me. Nobody said it. He didn't say it. He was David to me. Now, I heard the name Rockefeller as an adult. Of course, there's songs about the Rockefellers, but that didn't mean anything. That name didn't ring a bell to me.
Yeah, but I mean, he's everywhere. His picture, you would see it, so it's not...
I didn't think that this was going to be the kind of conversation we were going to have.
Well, I never know what kind of a conversation I'm going to have. I simply go into a conversation...
I feel like I'm combative almost, because I feel like...
No, to me, it's not that. To me, the main thing is the following. I think this is a very serious issue. I think it's such a serious issue that in America, I'm disappointed with our politicians that they don't spend enough time talking about this, nor does the mainstream media. And we've covered stories like this, God knows how many times. 359,000 missing children in 2022, according to the FBI. Never once do you hear these guys get up and campaign and talk about this kind of stuff. It's just we're talking about all the other stuff.
We had Dennis Hastert, who was the Speaker of the House, who was actually jailed for pedophilia.
If what you're saying is true, you're saying your loyalty is to Rockefeller.
I'm not saying that. Obviously, I'm speaking about it, and I've been speaking about it. Right. My loyalty is obviously not with the abusers. It never was. It was in a very controlled situation. I was being prepared as a child to become part of them. I said no at age 10. Now that is something that some children do, but most don't. Most don't have the strength to do that. So no, my loyalty is essentially not with Rockefeller, and it's not with any of those people. That's why I'm talking about it.
You said that. You said, I feel like a certain level of...
Yes, because a part of me is
I'm
still
repeating
attached.
what you're saying. I'm not saying
like
what I said.
If people talk about your parents a certain way, maybe at some point, no matter what the reality, maybe at some point you're going to feel some emotional strength there.
Yeah, but you're very comfortable not talking positively about your mom, but you're not very comfortable talking negatively about Rockefeller.
My mother never gave me as much as he did, and that just happens to be the truth. He gave me reflections that I never received before.
Did you ever reconnect with your mom or no?
I forgave her before she died.
Did you ever reconnect with her?
I forgave her before she died. I called her to forgive her before she died.
When you called her, how much longer after she died did she die?
A year after.
Did you guys ever spend time together again or no?
No, I did offer to come to see her when she was dying.
So how old were you the last time you saw your mom?
I don't remember, but it's a long time ago.
12 years old, 14 years old, 18 years old, 22
years old?
No.
I was an adult. I was in touch with her as an adult, and as these memories were coming back and I was working on these things little by little, it became clear that she was still the same person, that it's just there's this idea of what my mother was, which is what I needed to live with as a child to believe, to survive. And then there's the reality. And when the reality became clear, she was acting just exactly the same as she would have. She never changed. And really, there was no reflection there that I would have needed to emotionally grow. It was all false. It was all a projection. Had nothing to do with who I am. I was like, she needed me to be bland, either good and bland and ugly, or evil and powerful. And the David Rockefeller saw, even Paul van der Boeynants saw things in me that my mother never did. He recognized things that were actually intricately mine. So for my emotional growth, I needed.
You ever seen the movie Red Sparrow?
No, I don't need to see those movies because there's a lot of movies and they take like little aspects of what happens in the network. Yeah.
Oh, I fully believe that network exists. I am not from the school of thought that this doesn't exist. This is a real thing. I have a lot of friends in this space who are former CIA guys, Delta guys, military guys that, it's as real as it gets. It is happening. The only reason I asked this question for me is one of the recent stories that was, all over the news in America is over Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
Right.
When you hear the types of stories where billionaires give him $151 million of consulting fee.
Right.
I was like, well, who the hell gives who $151 million? Oh, he would help me on my taxes. That much? Maybe $1 million? Maybe $500,000? I don't know anybody that gets paid $158 million of consulting fee. Leon Black gives to Jeffrey Epstein. It's kind of weird, right? When people ask,
well,
that's the amount of money
that's
give.
very, I take that for granted. What people don't know is that I work with survivors again, and several survivors, younger survivors that I know were trained by him. And so...
Who? Jeffrey
Epstein.
Okay. Yep.
He was a
programmer. I thought you were talking David. That's why I'm asking.
Excuse me. Yeah. No, Jeffrey Epstein.
Uh-huh.
And they were trained by him some when they were babies. So just the story that's out there now is that, the teens and everything, we talk about, the abuse of teens, but really he was training children of all ages.
Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet him or Ghislaine?
No.
Never met him, even in New York?
No, I was out. In 1974, I was out.
Right.
Yeah.
And what did you do after you got out? What jobs did you do? When you came to New York, what were you doing in the 80s, 85?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about how I got out, because normally you don't get out.
Okay, tell me, how did you get out?
Look, first, the week that I was telling you in Italy, it was in Italy nearby Lake Como, so where I was sleeping with all these men and where these horrific things were happening.
Men and women, I think you said to me.
There were men and women,
right.
Absolutely, but I was sleeping with the men. I was not trained to be with women. I was only trained as a sex slave for men.
Mm-hmm.
And these horrible things were happening all week. And the end of the week, and this is April 30 is an important day for the Satanists. I'm not exactly sure why, but by the end of the week, I was going to have my I had already had the singing, I'd already had the performance for everybody there, and then I was going to have the ritual that was how I was going to be part of another I will, perhaps. You have to say I will. So you have to give your will to the network, to Satan. And so this was going to be my big entry. And I knew better. I didn't want to. I knew I didn't want to. I didn't want to pay that price. I didn't want to pay the price that it would take to be part of it. And so I did everything that I needed to do because I had been trained in a way that I knew not to say no. But after that, the next time I saw David Rockefeller, I rebelled. And then I was immediately tortured. I was thrown in a cage in a dungeon and tortured for several days.
By him?
But no, No, he never touched. He was always kept. He would for them. He watched, and he was there for some of it. He was verbally telling me that I was absolutely worthless. Um, but Hans Harmsen came too. And
Excuse me.
yeah, and basically, I was retrained for several days to make sure, that I would feel the lowest of the low, and that I was absolutely worthless, and anyway,
He's telling you this.
he told me that for sure, but also I was also tortured, and so he wasn't always there. He was there a few times, but he wasn't. And at the end of that couple of days, I was basically thrown back into the Belgian network, where I was used another year. And then my book actually speaks about the year after I've already been rejected from what I call the inner circle afterwards. And I ended up, there's this gangster that took an interest in me, and a year later, that became an extremely violent, vicious relationship. I'm 10, he's 20, and a year later he rescued me. And I had a near-death experience, so you could say that I didn't survive. I had an extremely big near-death